Welcome to, or welcome back to, the Agatha May Detective Agency. I'm Agatha May, and in this video, we're looking at two leftovers and a lawyer. The leftovers are two of the remaining congregants at Solid Rock Church. These two leftovers will be the only remaining church members I discuss, other than Nicholas Janae. I was going to include Nicky in this video, but I've decided he is special enough to have one of his very own. For those of you who were convinced I was just going to run a list of names of remaining congregants and didn't want to listen to me when I repeatedly said that wasn't my intent, this video is dedicated to you. We're going to start with the lawyer, Tom Winslow, because he's going to be the most disappointing of the group. And if we start with you being disappointed, we can only go up from there, right? Tom Winslow was born in 1980 to Bill and Janet Winslow. Now, Bill, Janet, and Tom sound like the characters in a 1960s scholastic book about three friends who solve mysteries using only a flashlight that consistently has a low battery, a small notebook, a half-chewed pencil, and a magnifying glass. Tom went to Irmo High School in Columbia, South Carolina, and graduated in 1998. I'm not sure what he did in high school, other than being in the Irmo High School Air Force JROTC and meeting his wife, Lauren. She wasn't his wife at the time, though. That would make his story too interesting, and we can't have that. Tom went on to study law at the University of South Carolina and Loyola University at New Orleans, at which point Tom decided his brain couldn't hold any more learning, and he commenced lawyerin'. Tom somehow talked Lauren into marrying him in 2005. In 2012, Tom decided to give politics a try and ran for the South Carolina House of Representatives, but only 23% of the voters wanted him to represent them. He then tried to nab a spot on the Georgetown, South Carolina City Council in 2015, but he came in last. I don't think Tom is cut out for a career in politics. Between his political failures, Tom decided his brain really could hold a little more knowledge, and he went to Charleston School of Law. Tom's career eventually led him to become partners with Stephen Goldfinch, who is an actual person and not a cute, diminutive yellow bird. In 2021, according to Tom, Stephen broke up the dynamic duo to pursue politics, even though he was already a politician. I think the breakup resulted from something more like Goldfinch telling Tom that his shoes didn't match his suit, and then Tom told Goldie that he had split ends, and a slapping fight began, and they haven't spoken since. So Tom is practicing law sans the little yellow bird, and some friends of his invited him to Solid Rock Church. I'd start rethinking my choice of friends at that point. Like Baked Tater Susie and our almost Spanish Senorita Tricia, Tom was also the star of a blog post on Solid Rock Church's website. And like the others, it was removed once Mica's death started making the news. So of course, I tracked it down and found the post. But man, was it Snoresville. Seriously. Tom is making Susie look like a little firecracker with the flashiest jazz hands you've ever seen. The post was written in February of this year, and Tom stated that he was currently working on his associates in theology. I swear, if he is taking classes at Reggie Miller's Buy My Books and I'll Give You a Degree School of Ever-Changing Names, Tom needs to go sit in the corner and think about what he's done. Now, there have been at least 3,259 people talking about how they are convinced that Tom Winslow had something to do with Mica's death. I'm not convinced. Let's start with Tom's property that people thought was a big aha moment. His property butts up against the creek that leads to the river that runs through the park where Mica was found. His property line is 8 miles as the crow flies to Lumber State Park, and his property is that small green section where the arrow is pointing. So let's pretend that the creek that comes from his property runs a straight line, and is actually navigable and that a kayaker could paddle down to the park. It would take them almost 3 hours to get there, and that's if they were paddling the entire time. But this creek isn't even slightly straight. It's extremely crooked. In fact, it's so crooked, it should be named Miller Creek. I will never get tired of naming crappy things after the Millers. So instead of taking almost 3 hours to make it to the park, it's going to take much, much, much longer. I could be more exact if I had an instrument to measure the meandering length of the creek, but I don't, so much, much, much longer will have to do. So Tom's property being on the South Carolina state line in a county that is just one over from where he lives isn't such a big deal to me. I don't think Tom and JP have the kind of connection that would cause him to be an accessory, or worse, to murder. They haven't been connected long enough. Now, some might say that JP has something on him and that's why Tom would do it. But JP doesn't go after someone who can fight back. An attorney would know how to fight back and would have the upper hand when it comes to JP. John Paul preys on the weak. Now, I've heard some say that Tom Winslow is slimy, and that's certainly possible. He is an attorney, after all. There has been much said about Mica's healthcare power of attorney. Now, there is a discrepancy between the date it was witnessed and the date that Mica signed it. It was witnessed on November 28, 2022, and she signed it on December 5, 2022. From what I understand, she was admitted to the hospital on November 28, 2022, and released on December 5, 2022. That could explain the discrepancy. And I don't know that the discrepancy of dates would invalidate the document. I think Tom Winslow has been an attorney long enough to not let something like this slip by, especially if he was doing something dodgy. Also, there were early reports that it wasn't notarized until the day after Mica signed it, but the date of the notarization is the same date that Mica signed it. I have also seen claims that John Paul waited until March of this year to file the document with the court, but the receipt for the filing shows that Mica is the customer. And the healthcare POA would have still been in effect even if it wasn't filed with the court. From what I understand, they are executable from the moment they're signed. My opinion is that Mica filed it because it states that if she and John Paul are divorced or are separated, the power of attorney is null and void and would revert to the alternate agent, who was her brother. I have discovered that Regina Ward, the attorney representing Mica's family, served Tom Winslow with papers of some kind on the 8th of this month. It will be interesting to see what that's about, but I think it's more than likely about John Paul's finances. There is one interesting thing, though, about Tom. He wrote a children's book titled Firefly Forest. It looks to be as scintillating as Tom is. The most fascinating thing surrounding him authoring a book, and possibly the most fascinating thing about Tom, is that in the About the Author section, Tom wrote that he is a together with a capital T. A together. Is this a reference to something in the book? Is it some weird way to say he's in a relationship? Is it a term coined by the same kooky couples counselor that taught Gwyneth Paltrow the term uncoupling as a euphemism for divorce? Can you tell how tragically unhip I am when I have to reference Gwyneth Paltrow events from a decade ago? Like Susie Skinner using the term we, did Tom absorb a twin in the womb and that's why he refers to himself as a together? Why do all these people refer to themselves in plural? Does anyone know what a together means? Is Tom an alien? Well, that's enough of that. Speaking of kooky, in 1957 the word kooky made its debut in print for the first time ever, and 1957 was coincidentally the year that Robert the Water Boy Lochel made his debut into the world. Now, I've heard people pronouncing his last name Lochel, but I think the correct pronunciation should be Lochel. It doesn't really matter because I'm just going to call him variations of Bob. For those who don't know, Bob is one of the remaining Solid Rock Church congregants. Now, his arrival into the world in 1957 made his parents, Frank and Florence, at least marginally proud. Frank and Florence's first son was named Frank, and I'm heavily disappointed that they didn't name Bobby something like Flamingo or Frittata or Funyun, just to keep with the F-name theme. Fun fact, Robert's middle name is Wayne. Viewer Liz H. 1988 commented on one of Reggie's videos about how many murderers had the middle name Wayne. I looked it up, and it's quite extensive, and this isn't even the full list. Now, I'm not in any way insinuating that Bobby is a murderer, just that he shares a common middle name with a lot of them. As a child, Bobby was in the Boy Scouts in Penwyn, Pennsylvania, and I don't know how well he learned to tie a double-sheet bend knot, but he definitely got the hang of using a sprinkler as an implement to commit assault and battery. I didn't even know they taught that in the Scouts. Bob attended several schools in Pennsylvania, including Lower Merion High School, Delaware County Christian School, and Harriton High School. He then studied at the Art Institute of Philadelphia. Now, I don't know if he had to attend 3 high schools because his family moved that much, or if he was getting into trouble, or maybe it just took him so long to finish high school he needed variety. Speaking of education, Bobby's brother Frank seems to have gotten the brains in the family. He died in 2021 but held numerous patents for things I know nothing about. Things such as an aqueous binder comprising reaction products of itaconic acid. Well, sure, Frank. Bob and Frank also have a sister. She sadly does not have a name that begins with F either, even though Frank Sr., Florence, Frank Jr., Funyun, and Fluffy would have been fabulous family names. As an adult, Bob lived in the Philadelphia metro area, the land of Quakers, brotherly love, and cheesesteaks. He worked at a car repair shop, but I don't think he got his hands dirty actually working on the cars, though. He seems more the type to try and sell unnecessary repairs. Bob was married to Brenda, and she divorced him for probably a number of reasons. Baba Fur soon grew tired of being mistaken for a Quaker and moved to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, where no Quaker dares to step foot. His move to South Carolina found Bob to be the proud owner of multiple traffic tickets, as well as being arrested for driving more than 25 miles an hour over the speed limit while having an open container of his favorite adult beverage along for the ride with him. Well, it sounds like old Bobby could lead a class on safe driving. After spraying 5 of the protesters at Solid Rock Church in the face with water, Bob can now add 5 counts of assault to his record. I'm pretty sure he now has more arrests on his record than Frank had patents. Way to go, Bobbert! Bob became a member of Solid Rock Church in 2020, seemingly of his own accord. He married Bonnie Laudenslager in May of this year, and last month they bought a house together. Bob seems to like women whose name starts with B. And he loves Bonnie so much that he commits assaults for her. He said he sprayed the protesters because his wife was upset. Personally, I think Bonnie needs to find a little backbone and commit her own assaults, and Bobifer needs to be honest and say he sprayed the protesters because they annoyed him. There are reports that Solid Rock Church gave Bob a large sum of money after he had been hospitalized. So, was it a gift and Bobby feels beholden to John Paul because of it? Or was it a loan and he's having to pay it back to the church? Maybe he's loyal because of the perk of being able to cop 5 charges of assault and have someone named John Paul Miller pay for his attorney. Whatever the reason, Bobby is loyal to John Paul, and so far seems more than willing to go down with the ship. And now for a leftover that isn't as wrinkly as Bob, let's turn our attention to Mark, the piano is my whole personality, Kaufman. Mark was born in 1971 to Ron and Mary Jane in Baltimore, Maryland, home of crab cakes and hairspray. When Mark was 5, the family moved to Myrtle Beach. As a child, Mark was in local theater and stole the stage in every performance. I don't know if that last bit is actually true, but I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt. Also, does anyone else think he looks a lot like Adam Rich, who played Nicholas on 8 is Enough? Mark graduated from Sikorsky High School in 1989 and then attended Coastal Carolina College for 2 years as a music major. But he said the classes weren't challenging enough, so he quit. He was quoted as saying, quote, "Once I hear a song one time, I can usually play it. Reading music helps because I can see what I'm playing, but I don't need it." End quote. Mark played the piano around town during the early 90s, and in 1993 became the musician at the Dixie Belle Saloon at Dixie Stampede in Myrtle Beach. Well, how is that for a rootin' tootin' yee-haw? While jamming out on 1890s saloon music, Mark was repeatedly annoyed by a popcorn server at the Stampede, whose name was John Paul Miller. Yes, JP and Mark first met over a bag of popcorn that smelled slightly of wheat straw and horse manure. According to the Solid Rock Church website, Mark wasn't impressed when he first met John Paul. Quote, "JP was amazed by Kaufman's skills with the ivories, but Mark wanted nothing to do with the younger employee." End quote. In 1995, Mark was in a band named Soul Dogs, spelled Dawgs. Now, this information lends nothing important to the story, other than to show that Mark is the kind of person who uses the word dog. In 1996, Mark started playing at Crocodile Rocks, and John Paul used to go harass him there too. But Mark still wasn't interested in being friends with Monkey Boy. No means no, John Paul. Let's take a break in the timeline to discuss who actually owns Crocodile Rocks. Now, the original owners of the club were Burroughs and Chapin in 1995, even though the idea to start the club was Craig Smith's. In 1997, B&C sold it to a group of Grand Strand businessmen operating under the corporate names Flipside 2 and Flipside 3. Craig Smith is the agent for the Flipside groups and is named numerous times in newspapers as owner of Crocodile Rocks. He also is the agent for Flipside 4, Flipside 5, and Flipside 6. Flipside 2 and 3 have since dissolved, but 4, 5, and 6 are still in good standing with the South Carolina Secretary of State's office. Why so many Flipsides? Marty Richardson is a former co-owner of Crocodile Rocks, and he left in 2006. Mark Kaufman was listed as entertainment coordinator in 2011, but by 2020 was named as an owner. There is no mention of John Paul Miller as owner of Crocodile Rocks anywhere I can find. I don't know where the information that he was an owner and transferred his ownership to his son came from, but I would love to see the proof of that if anyone has it. The owners of Crocodile Rocks also own Revolutions, which is a dance club. Fun little story about Revolutions. In 2000, they raised money for the Myrtle Beach Fire Department by hosting the 4th annual ham rubbing. The fire department politely declined the donation when they discovered that the ham rubbing was a private party where partygoers were invited to dance while hams were rubbed on their bare chest. Craig Smith was quoted as saying, quote, "If somebody goes up there and pulls their shirt up, it's all in good taste. It's not like a strip bar." End quote. You're right, Craig. It's not like a strip bar, because strip clubs don't allow patrons to rub cured meat on the strippers. Now, I don't know Craig Smith, but the fact that he thinks people rubbing ham on other people's bare chest is in good taste tells me everything I need to know about him. And for the love of all things holy, why is a ham rubbing even a thing? For starters, ham has a lot of salt in it, and that can't be good for the nips. Not to mention the fact that I never want to see a ham rubbed on anyone's chest, even if they're particularly perky. but I definitely don't want to see one rubbed on some old, saggy man boobs. This is who Mark Kaufman chose to go into business with on purpose. Let's continue our break in the timeline and talk about Mark's love life for a minute. Like Bobbert marrying women whose name starts with B, Mark loves the ladies whose names start with a K sound. Maybe he's just crazy about alliteration and insists on the K for Kaufman. His first wife, Courtney, was only 4 years his junior. They divorced in 2006, and in 2009, Mark had a son with Carrie, who wasn't his wife and was 12 years his junior. Mark's second wife, Caitlin, was 23 years his junior. They're now divorced, and Mark is waiting for his next wife, probably named Cotillion or Catamaran, to turn 18 so they can get married. Back to the timeline. Now we veered off when Mark began playing at Crocodile Rocks in '96, and Monkey Boy was stalking him. Through the first decade of the 21st century, John Paul persistently hounded Mark into coming to church, and Mark consistently turned him down. Now the story is that in 2015, John Paul had stopped preaching, but I haven't found any proof of that. I think it's just a story John Paul uses to explain why a large portion of his congregation left after he and Allison's divorce, because that sounds better than saying that congregants left because they found out he was having inappropriate interactions with underage girls who attended his church. Anyway, the story is that Mark told John Paul that if he'd go back to preaching, he would come and play the piano and sing at the church. This is when the parodies at the church were started. JP said that Mark didn't know any contemporary Christian music, but he knew all the secular music from playing at piano bars. So Mark, who was so good at music he didn't need to go to college and could play a song after hearing it once and could read music, couldn't manage to play any gospel songs. That is sad that his fingers won't work when it comes to playing church music. I wonder if there's a name for his condition. Like others in the circle of shame, Mark isn't afraid of getting a traffic ticket or 30. That's right, Mark is leading the pack with 30 traffic violations. And I realize that I failed to give Wayne Miller's count, which is 20, and that seems pretty paltry next to Mark's. Better step on it, Reg. Literally. Once again, I've never known so many people who have so many traffic violations. Is there an I'm above the law gene? In 2020, Mark, along with 2 partners, neither of whom are John Paul, but one is ham-loving Craig, opened 88 Keys Piano Bar. Mark really enjoys piano bars. In January of 2024, Mark received his student pilot's license, air pilot, not maritime. On April 24, 2024, Solid Rock Church purchased a 2007 Cirrus SR-22 single-engine 4-seat airplane. There have been rumors that the plane was donated by Tom Winslow. That is not true. The rumor was started because someone saw that Tom had been appointed to the State Pilotage Commission, but they governed maritime pilots, not air pilots. The gentleman who sold the plane to the church lives in Atlanta, Georgia, and had purchased the plane from an aviation company in 2020. I don't know how much Solid Rock paid for this particular plane, but similar ones sell for between $330,000 and $400,000. On the airplane's registration with the FAA, Solid Rock Ministries is listed as the owner, but the address is Mark Kaufman's home address. Well, that does not seem accurate. Why not use the church's address? I have theories. The first is that Mark bought the plane but didn't want to pay taxes on it. JP agreed to putting it in the church's name as long as he was able to say that the church owned it, and he'd get to use it so it would look like he was a much fancier pastor than he really is. The second theory is that John Paul bought the plane for Mark. But why would he buy such an expensive gift for someone who had to be hounded into being his friend? What could Mark have done to deserve such a gift? My third theory is Just kidding. I don't actually have a third theory. Does anyone have any alternate theories as to why the church's plane is registered under Mark's home address? I will have a video of Nick the... No, that's too easy of a nickname. Anyway, I'll have the video of Nicholas up soon. I have no first-hand knowledge of Tom Winslow or Mark Kaufman being investigated for any crime. Robert Lochel is going to court in August for the assault charges. I don't know of any other charges or any investigations where he is a person of interest. They are all innocent until proven guilty, even though Bobby is on video and has already admitted to the police that he sprayed the protesters. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, comment, and share as this will help my channel grow. Until next time, stay safe and be happy.